All right, welcome back to the Tell It Like It Is podcast. I'm your host, Alexi, and I have Davon Culley returning with me. Davon, thank you for sticking around.
No problem. Glad to be here as always.
Um, Tell me a little bit about your greatest influence when you were growing up.
Uh, well, clearly, I think it definitely had to be my mom. I was my mom's only child, so and my mom was she had a small family. Um, both of her parents were had passed on when I was a baby. So most of the time coming up, and she didn't have any siblings. So growing up, it was most of the time in the house it was just me and her. So she really was the main one who influenced me, and she's the one that kept me on the right path. I tell everyone that I didn't do a lot of things because I had to answer to my mama, and I knew if I got out of line, mama was gonna go upside my head. So she helped me with that guidance and just held me accountable, which I think was the most important thing. She always told me I can do anything, and she always encouraged me. And you could, as a child, you always want more because we're kids, we want everything. But honestly, I don't think I ever really didn't have anything that I wanted for the most part. So mom was definitely the biggest influence. She's the main reason why I'm the person that I
Where did
am
you
today.
grow up?
Definitely.
Where did you grow up?
Where? Oh,
Yeah.
Brooklyn. I'm a Brooklyn boy, Brooklyn, New York, born and raised.
Are you still in Brooklyn?
No, now I've lived in Queens now. Right now, I'm currently in Long Island City. I've been in Queens for a little while.
You've seen Brooklyn go through some changes.
Oh, yeah.
What
Oh, yeah.
What is the scene like in Brooklyn? What are you seeing over there?
Um, let's see. Well, there is, there's a battle that's really going on to me in Brooklyn. You have old Brooklyn and the neighborhoods the way that I knew them growing up. And you have the residents who have been there for all this time and who like their neighborhoods for the most part the way they were. And then you have the gentrifiers who have been coming, who've been changing the neighborhoods, who've been bringing more of their environments into the neighborhoods. And there's just a battle going on because there's some mixing that's going on. And I think mixing is good because that doesn't keep the neighborhood static. So that's good. But it feels at times like the gentrifiers and the new people in the new environment are trying to take over and change everything about the old part of the neighborhood and what was there, which is kind of like that's kind of what brought you here in the first place. Brooklyn has its own flavor. You can kind of bring a little bit of where you came from, but you're not just going to come in here and just change the flavor that was here because that's just not going to happen. That's what kind of brought you here in the first place. So it's a battle for kind of like what defines New York. I grew up in Flatbush. So to me, when you say Brooklyn, to me, me personally, I've always thought Flatbush, Bed-Stuy, Brownsville, East New York, neighborhoods like that. That's Brooklyn to me. I've never thought Park Slope, parts of Williamsburg. To me, that doesn't define Brooklyn. They're included in it, but that doesn't define it. And I think parts of like now for a lot of people, especially people that aren't from here, when you say Brooklyn, they generally think like Williamsburg and they think the gentrified part of Williamsburg. And I'm like, that's not Brooklyn. That's part of it, but that's mostly people who aren't even from here. So you can't not be from here and then think you're going to define what it means to be from a place. To me, it doesn't work like that.
Which high school did you go to?
I actually went to high school out in Bensonhurst. I went to FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt High School out in Bensonhurst.
So, a lot of what fascinates me and why I decided to do the podcast is, you know, we're living history. We all are. Right?
Absolutely.
50 years from now, there's going to be a history lesson talking about us, right? And what
Agreed.
you're describing is old Brooklyn versus the gentrifiers.
Right.
And this is the same thing that happened in Harlem, right? It's
That's correct.
happening in all of the five boroughs, I would say. And the reality is, there was a time when Manhattan was below Central Park.
That's correct.
And little by little, it crept up to Central Park and it just crept all the way up into Harlem. And now they're coming for those outer boroughs.
Exactly.
So
Very
the
much so.
interesting thing is when you read it in a when you read it in a history book, it's going to be like one sentence. You know,
Right. Yeah, it's definitely different. Like you said, as you live through this transition, it's very, very different. And it's tough because I don't. It's kind of like I said, Nick. Change is not always bad, you know, and it's okay. I've One of the things that attracts people to New York is the diversity. And one of the things that makes New York great is that you have people from all over the country, all over the world. That difference is part of what makes it great, you know. But again, for me, on the other hand, there is just there's just certain there's just certain parts of New York that just aren't going to that to me should not be changed because that's part of the experience. It's like when you read these articles about people who move into a neighborhood like Washington Heights, and then they start calling the police because there's a whole bunch of noise or it's loud to them. And I'm like, why the hell would you move to Washington Heights in the first place if you're looking for quiet? You moved to the wrong place. This is what the neighborhood's always been. That's just the feeling and the flavor of that neighborhood. If you want quiet, you have to move someplace else. I'm sorry, you're not in the suburbs anymore. You are in the city and you're in a loud part of the city, you know? So it feels like stuff like that upsets me because that's like you're trying to change, like I said before, the essence of what that neighborhood is. And that's what frustrates me, you know?
yeah. So much of what happens is they move into a rundown building, buy the building, fix it up, and
Right,
the tenants who are there, they don't fix those units, by the way. They fix
right.
only the units that are unoccupied,
That's
and those
correct.
units have double the rent.
Exactly.
The
And
old
then they
people,
raise the rent, right? And then they raise the rent of the units they didn't fix. The people can't afford it, so they have to move. And then once they move, then they do.
um, it's yeah. So that's what the podcast is about. It's about all of these little stories, all of
Yes,
these
sir.
little stories, and it's a part of a bigger story. And I think you don't have to be a genius to kind of connect the dots, but I think it's interesting to me how people live divided and we live through these atrocities and we kind of like just struggle through quietly.
Right.
And like if you read a book on Jim Crow era,
Yes.
people just lived through it, and they spoke out when they could, and a lot of people lost a lot of things.
Oh, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
what I'm trying to do is highlight the everyday things that people are just kind of like, what are you gonna do? Because it's really, really
Right.
bad. Um,
Right.
but no one cares. No one's showing up. New York Times is not writing about it.
Right.
Grandma's getting pushed out. Oh well.
Right.
I have a lot of experience of going down to housing court.
Okay.
And if you want to see some depressing stuff,
Oh,
go to
absolutely.
housing court.
We universally in the court system, we all say one of the hardest, if not the hardest place to work is in housing court. That is a tough, tough environment to work in, because no one that comes into housing court is happy. You have people who are either getting ready to get kicked out of their home or, they're fighting to hold on, or they're trying to get their landlord to make these repairs that they're not making. No one is happy in housing court. It's a very, very difficult place.
Now, working in the courts, you see it every day. So, like, I don't have to tell you, but
Mhm.
it's interesting because the judge, he's following the law as it's written in the book.
Right,
Grandma hasn't worked since 1978. She's been rent stabilized. The program that sends her the money only sends 861. And if they move the rent to 900, then there's that $40 that she can't pay. And she
right,
has to go beg it from a program to get a stipend. And that program just had its money cut because Trump was cutting programs. So now
right,
all these grandmas are going to court for this $40 a month that they're can no, and the judge sees it, but his job is just to do what the law says on paper.
right,
The
right.
lawyer, he works for the building, so he's getting his paycheck. So he's like, he sees it's an old lady, and what is he gonna do? And then you have the public defender. She has about 92 cases, and
Exactly.
all of
That's
them are the same exact thing. And one
right,
by one, the judge is just sitting there like, and for the most part, the law, they're protected, but there are loopholes. And in the meantime, if grandma misses coming to court, or if
right,
grandma's sick,
right,
grandma's tired, she didn't get the thing in the mail, or
right.
she just didn't feel like it that day, or because of COVID.
Yep.
Now we have missed appointments. We can go out. Like, I've been through it all.
Yeah, yeah. No,
So
you
little
you
by
summed it up
little,
perfectly. You summed up the experience in housing court perfectly. That's how the court works, unfortunately.
little by little, they're getting one grandma out at a time.
Exactly.
And grandma was taking care of her grandnephew who couldn't find a job. His kids from a half situation. And
Right.
so he, dad's not working, grandma has her set income. Like, no one knows this real America that's happening here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the experience. That is the city experience. It's not, and that's what I was kind of like what I was talking about. It's not the shiny stuff that you see on TV all the time. You really want to get the what the experience is like, especially for the people that don't have a lot of money. Those are the things that give you a glimpse as to what people are experiencing. There's been such a housing boom, and we've had condos and new apartments all over the place. But how many of those, what percentage of those are for people in low income? You know, they make these huge buildings, these 40, 50-story buildings, and put in all these features and all these apartments, and such a small percentage is set aside for people with low income. And it's always like, well, where are they supposed to go when you build this stuff? Where's the new housing for people that are low income? Where are they supposed to go? Where are they supposed to live? Because they keep moving them out of different places in these neighborhoods. Because, like you said, gentrifying keeps expanding. But where are they supposed to go? Because there are large numbers. Everybody talks about the people coming in with money. There are a tremendous amount of people who are not making a lot of money. So what happens to them? Where do they go? Because everybody's getting mad at the state. The state shouldn't be taking care of these people. People should be able to they should be able to take care of themselves, right? So they put a stigma on you if you ask the state to try to help you, because you don't make enough to fully support or to get a place to live and be able to survive, because you need more than rent. You can, if you pay your rent, that's great, but you still need to eat and clothes and stuff. You still have to live. So they get mad at you if you ask the government for some money to help you out. They get mad at you if you don't have a place to live. And then, but what are these people supposed to do? Nobody has answers for any of this. You can't live off minimum wage. Minimum wage is not, you're not going to survive, especially in New York City. That's nothing. So it's like, well, what's supposed to happen? You know, it's a crazy cycle that ends up, and these people end up falling by the wayside. And unfortunately, the courts are where a lot of these people end up for one reason or another.
Well, we criminalize vagrancy and
Mm-hmm.
unemployment, and you're just criminalizing the bottom of the system, and then they get tossed into a jail cell, which cost us more.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you grew up in the high school and you're seeing all of these things. Things are changing really fast. How
Yeah.
does how does this inform how you raise your daughter and what you tell her?
Yeah. Well, I've always emphasized to her. Um, First off, I always emphasize to her, you treat people the way you want to be treated. That's the basis. We're gonna start there. And you have to learn a lot of it. You have to learn from experience, but for the most part, you accept people for who they are and you treat people the way you want to be treated. So we don't look down on anybody. My daughter, her mom is Mexican. So she's half black and half Mexican, which has definitely informed her experiences without me even having to say a lot of things, because she's had two different experiences. You know, she will have, especially growing up, because I started seeing it in junior high. That's kind of where I saw a divide with her. Junior high going into high school. Junior high, she had a lot of Hispanic friends and she had some black friends. Then when she went into high school, I started to notice I didn't see as many Hispanic friends she had. She mostly had black friends at that point. So I remember we were talking about it one time, and she was like, Dad, there was a time where I was kind of caught in the middle. For my Hispanic friends, they kind of thought I wasn't Hispanic enough, you know, because I think if you look at my child, to me, you can tell she's mixed, but most people will assume she's black. But you can tell she's mixed, but just not with what. And then she was like, she had black friends who thought that she was, because she didn't necessarily talk like them or necessarily act like them a little bit. So to them, Layla wasn't black enough. So this was something that she was dealing with, and I didn't know the degree that she was dealing with it until we had a chance to talk about it. So um, but I've always encouraged her, you are black and you are Mexican, and you will never have to choose between the two. You are both, so make sure you embrace being both. And just along with that, you just take people for who they are. There's going to be plenty of minorities who are going to be down for you and help you out, and there's going to be plenty of minorities who are going to try to stab you in the back first opportunity they get. There's going to be plenty of people of other races, white, non-white, who are going to be really good friends to you, and then there's going to be other ones who you can't trust worth a damn. So you just take people individually and just try your best not to assume and make assumptions. We all do. We all have prejudices to some in way, shape, or form. But just try not to just be general. Oh, this person is Asian, so they're like this. Oh, this person is white, so they're like this. Just try not to do that. And I think I've emphasized that. And I think so far she's done pretty well with that.
What is she doing now? What is she into?
She um she is she is a performer. She's into music. And so she does hip hop, she does poetry.
Okay.
Um, she's been doing a lot of event promotion. So she went to school in Philly. She graduated from Temple. Um, so she's been doing a lot of events there in Philly. She's transitioning now, coming back to New York. So she's gonna start throwing and hosting more events here. She's big on creating space for women creatives, so women artists and women um, business people, just creating events to give women an opportunity to just showcase their talents and what they can do. So that's really what she's focusing on now, and I'm really proud of her. She's done a really good job. So I'm
When you
really
say
proud of her.
events, are we talking about like happy hours? Like what kind of events are we talking about?
It's mostly events for different types of events for performers, like other musicians to perform, stuff like that. And then she'll do like a pop-up shop. So she'll have people performing, and then she'll have, again, people selling their goods and stuff. So those type of events.
Okay, sounds like I need to connect with her. I think events of the future, and I think another large part of where I'm coming from with the podcast is the idea of entrepreneurism.
Sure.
People of color, we need a platform where you can say, all right, I need X, Y, and Z. I want someone, whether it's a black Facebook group or a black
Right.
app or something like that. We need
Right.
places where we can go and stay within the community. Like
Yes.
Facebook was a new internet tool that help us have more community. We need stuff like that for black events and those kinds of things. And I think specifically, I think right now we need to do more like bigger organized events. So like
Right.
Blacks of Philly coming out, Blacks of
Right.
New York, and not have these not have these white people own it, you know,
Right.
and not because
Agreed.
they're white, but for them it's just about profits. So
Absolutely.
they're not
Right.
thinking like, oh, I'm gonna host this because black people need to get together and grow. They just seeing a check, so
Absolutely.
they don't
No
care if
sense.
it's
No sense of
Caribbean or
community. Right.
exactly,
Yes,
exactly.
sir.
So I'm specifically moving into that space because I think it's important, and
I agree.
that's the
I
same thing.
I think that's one of the things. I think that's one of the things, too, not to cut you off. I think that's one of the good things that hopefully will continue post COVID and just post 2020. So much happened last year. And I believe that one of the good things that came out of that was that number one, like you said, I think a lot of people have tried to create their own business and their own lines and just more black ownership and entrepreneurship, like you said. I think that's definitely been great to see. And I've also it's been great to see people collaborating. It's not so much, okay, this is what I do, and then you do something similar, you do the same thing. So I'm not going to interact with you, so I'm going to hold my own and you hold yours. I think it's great that I've been seeing more people working together, because we always like to say, listen, there's enough for everybody. We can all eat, so, no one has to hoard all the money. There's enough for everybody to be able to be successful. So I think it's good seeing that people have more sense of community and being involved and looking at who they surround themselves with and who they interact with and where they spend their dollars, who they give their money to. I think that's a good thing that's has come out of this pandemic, and I'm just hoping people will hold on to that and they don't lose that, because I think you're right. I think that's the first big step that we as a people and as a culture is we really need to emphasize supporting our own and taking care of each other, because this country has shown us for thousands of years what they think of us, and what's important to them is money. Like you said, money, they're worried about the bottom line. They're not worried about the health of the people. They're not worried about how well everybody is doing. They really, America is capitalism. So America cares about money. That's always going to be their focus, because that's really what capitalism is all about. So we really need to, it's kind of play the game a little bit, but just know that we have power and our money is power. So we should, if we take the time to commit and support us and give our money to us, that helps all of us, you know. And I think hopefully we can continue to emphasize that, if people will continue to realize that and focus on that, and that can help us get to another level from where we are now.
Devin, I think the so it's happening, right? We all know that it's happening, and I'm 100% sure it's going to continue after the pandemic.
Right.
With the rise of the internet, Instagram and Facebook, like the
Mhm.
advertising is crazy.
Yes, sir.
So there is plenty of, even your hair care store is going to be on the decline because it's competing with online. And
Right. It's true.
you and me, we have power as sellers because we know five people. If everyone who knows five people made a store, we could all make money from that.
That's correct.
And the longer it takes us to do that, the more Amazon's gonna make.
Right.
So each person has to become like an Amazon store. Like even if it's just for your grandmother and your aunt who doesn't like the computer, like we have to align ourselves with that kind of thing. And someone, whatever it is you're passionate about, you have to make content for that because I think in the future this is going to be your resume. Like your
Right.
content is your resume. So it doesn't matter if you sweep floors. It doesn't matter if you're a court officer. Like you need to make content on your way to work. Like just
Right.
something that kind of gives you that currency, that community currency. And then we have to align ourselves behind networks. And I think a lot of that is going to come back into events. And where we live in the Northeast, winter events are going to slow down. So
Yeah.
it's really spring, summer, fall events. And I think we have to, if you ask me in terms of running and fitness, I think we have to take that more seriously and build on that, everything that's happening right now.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think this is a very unique time. If we're talking about running, this is a unique time because there is a serious backlash against New York Roadrunners, right?
They'll
So,
survive.
right, yeah, the Roadrunners will be fine. They're well money, so they'll be fine. But I think what you have now is because there's such a wide range of people who have a negative feeling towards Roadrunners
Mhm.
now, I think now there's an opportunity for other race organizations to put
Mhm.
on races. It's an opportunity for New York City Runs. It's an opportunity for a Pace Runs, which is a Black run race organization that's putting on races. It's an opportunity for people like Bridge Runners who've been putting on a couple of races. There's a gap there that there's an opportunity now to get your foot in the door and establish yourself. Because whereas maybe a couple years before, people were just like Roadrunners, Roadrunners, Roadrunners qualify for the marathon, giving them all their money. Now people are more open to giving their money to other places. And then exactly like you said, just putting on, it's just about quality. People will always go where they feel their money is giving them quality. So this is a great opportunity to try to get yourself in the door. And because like you said, Roadrunners is not going anywhere. They're always going to be here. But if you can go and support some of these other smaller businesses, and if you can go and support a smaller minority business, which is going to give you a quality experience, there's no reason why you shouldn't go and support them. And I think now's the time to prove that you can do that. That's why I love pace runs, and I try to support their races as much as I can because they're a great experience, and there's just a vibe there. There's that community vibe, which is something you don't get from a road runners race, which
Mhm.
is different. It goes back to what we said before. It's hard to get that community vibe when you're running 10, 11, 12,000 people. It's just not the same. But the smaller races, a couple, 1, 2, 300 people, it's a much more intimate experience. And then that's really where the bonds get built. And that's when you meet people and that's where you vibe. That's where community comes in. And they do a really good job of giving you that community feeling.
Yeah, man, that's something that I'm really thinking about going forward. Little by little, you do have a lot of positivity, and I see it happening, and I want to be a part of it. And I
Mhm.
are you going back to Atlanta this year?
Oh, for the race? Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
You have your ticket already?
Not yet. I have to get it. I'm signed up. I have to make my reservations, but I'm definitely going. That's become a must go for me. I've been there. I did the first. Actually, every year they've held it, I've been there. So I'm looking forward to going back. It's funny, Alexi. I was just explaining to somebody the story, and you'll appreciate this. How the first year they did it, I ran the half the first year, and just from being who I am and my experience, anytime before that I was in a race and I saw another black person in a race, you'd always at least do the head nod or acknowledge that person in some way, shape, or form. So there was a point where at the start of the half, we did like a 3 mile out, and then we turned around and did a loop and we started coming back. So after you did the loop, you started to see the runners coming. So just out of instinct, I did what I always did, and I was just shouting out all the minority runners I saw. But it was great because it was like 95% minority runners. So I was shouting at everybody, and it was the most amazing feeling. So I'd never had that before. So it was great just seeing all these brown faces coming right back at me and shouting them out, and everybody shouting you out back. That's just a feeling that it's hard for, to me, if you are in the majority and if you're white and every race you go to is overwhelmingly white, I
Mhm.
don't think you can grasp the concept of what that feels like, because you're the majority. So every race you go is predominantly white. So you don't understand not being the majority and then going to some place and then you are in the majority finally after never ever being there. You know, that's why that left such an impression on me, that it was amazing. And again, same thing, fellowship. So many people come from all over the country. You get to see friends you haven't seen in a while. You get to meet people that you see online and social media. You get to meet them face to face and stuff. So I always try to make it. So I'll definitely be there this year. I'm looking forward to it.
How many years has it been?
Uh, one, two. This will be the third year of in person since last year was virtual.
Okay, so
Yeah,
fourth year.
yeah. This will be the fourth one. Yep.
Yeah, man. There's a huge pride that I get from being black, seeing black events, and those kinds of things. How would you define blackness?
Oh, that's a really really good question. That's a big question there. Um, I don't I don't know if I can answer that just because it's so
There's something though, like if you watch, let's say, a white comedian do a show
right,
versus a black comedian doing a show.
right,
You hear a white song versus a black song. Like even if you don't see the person and you imagining who's singing it, and
right,
it might actually be a white person, but the
right,
way they're singing, you like, oh snap, I'm shocked, that's a white
right,
person.
right,
So when I'm
right,
saying how do you define it, it's like there's something there that you just like, oh, I could tell.
right. Yeah. Yeah, I can see what you're saying. I can agree with you on that. There's just a it's just, I guess, trying to define it is the hard part. There is just a I'm not even sure how to describe it. There's just a
Clear.
feel and a way of expressing yourself, and it's I don't know. It's hard to define. It's hard to define. It's one of those things, like you said, you definitely know it. You definitely know it when you see it or you're around it. Um, I don't think I have the words to
All
define
right,
it.
here's the easier question.
Okay.
Someone on TikTok who's
Yeah.
100 million with 100 million followers and they're doing black stuff and they're not black.
Right.
How do you see that?
Uh, it depends. Um, it depends on what they're doing and how they're doing it. If this person is famous, if this white person for me, if this white person is famous for only doing black stuff, yeah, that's not going to work for me. But it depends on how they're doing it. You can be a white person, and if you are immersed in the culture, you can legitimately be part of the culture. I don't think just by the fact that you're white, that means you can't be part of the culture. You can definitely be part of the culture. If you grow up in the environment and you have similar experiences, you can be a part of the culture.
Vanilla
However,
Ice.
if you're just trying to profit off of it, or if you're just trying to make fun of it, the authenticity will come through to me. If you're faking, it will be clear to see. And I think that's kind of where I that's where I would draw the line. So like you said, if you're a TikToker and you're doing all this black stuff, but you're not really from the culture, I think after a while that would definitely bother that's not okay to me, because you're making money off of these other people. And
Now we
this
were
is
talking about gentrifying, and
right,
at one point you gentrify Harlem, but there's a way to gentrify the culture.
right. That that's definitely true. There certainly is.
So
There
that's what
certainly
that's what we're talking about right now. Gentrifying black culture crossing over into mainstream culture, and
right,
even to this day, if we do it, it's ghetto and unacceptable. But when they
right,
do it, they're just being relaxed, you know.
right. Yeah. Yeah, you're right, and it doesn't get treated or accepted or viewed the same way. You know, it's always it's kind of like when you're being authentic and you're being who you really are, that naturally comes through, and that gets accepted. It's like I'll use hip hop as an example. I'm a veteran, so I've been a fan of hip hop for a long time. The the when hip hop artists, when rap first started, and for a long time, rap was not on the pop charts at all. They wouldn't even acknowledge that it was like a real music form. So
It's like
there was
graffiti.
right, exactly. They were fighting a battle for years. And then slowly but surely, it kind of started with Run DMC to some extent. And then after time, then along comes somebody like Hammer. Hammer comes along. He hit it really big on the pop charts. And then kind of late 80s, early 90s, more hip hop artists started showing up on the pop charts. So now you had to, as an artist, you start to see success. You see our artists being successful and making money. So now you have to make a decision. What type of artist do you want to be? Do you want to rap the way you want to rap, or are you going to change how you rap to try to get the record sales? Now in hip hop, record sales are generally driven by white people, right? White people buy the majority of the music. So you have a decision to make. What type of rapper to be? Who are you going to cater to? So at that point, it becomes a decision. That's why somebody like, we'll just go with Vanilla Ice. Vanilla Ice was clear that this dude's not authentic. That's why most black people wasn't messing with him, because you could just tell he didn't come across as somebody who was authentic. You know, there's plenty of hip hop artists. They may not sell as much, but they connect with the people because they feel like they're authentic. So authenticity, I think, even when you're doing other types of businesses, I think to me, that's the key. And that's what will separate out people who are really successful or people who really connect with the community to people who are just in it trying to make money. And I think most people can tell the difference between the two. Not everybody, but I think most people can.
Where does Eminem fall on that scale for you?
To me, I think Eminem is very authentic personally. I think his what he raps and what he raps about, I think that necessarily may not connect with a lot of people. Because Eminem, he can be out there with some of the stuff he raps about. I will not deny that at all. But in terms of
Is he hip
actual,
hop?
to me, he definitely is. Talent wise, the way he puts songs together, and Eminem is an incredibly talented rapper. His content is what turns a lot of people on.
All right. So now we're talking about a lot of things, right?
Yeah,
Um, I could jump around because I have a lot to say on this.
I
Um,
got you.
the which era in hip hop do you think is the best?
Oh, easy. 90s hip hop. The golden era is defined from like 88 to like 92, 93. I would say if you start from like 1988, I think if you extend it to like 95, you have to at least get to the Biggie era. So I would say from 88 to like 95, 96. I think that was the best era. And I tell you why. Because especially at the beginning, from 88 to like the early 90s, hip hop artists were allowed to be a lot more a lot more variety than what you see now. A lot of the, in the early 90s, once NWA hit it really big, because they were super graphic, super violent, and they sold a lot. So once they started making millions, that's when everything changed. And I think a lot of the music industry started pushing people towards making that type of music. If you go back, like in the late 80s, you had your hardcore rappers, you had your party rappers, you had your got people who made music dance, you had your dance rappers, they would make music for the clubs. You had your X Clan, your Public Enemy, you had your pro-black rappers, you had a wide variety. And the rule was always just be original. Don't do what anybody else is doing. But then eventually, once NWA and then Dr. Dre after that, and once those guys started making millions just being really violent, then it changed because now there was this blueprint of this is how you make a lot of money. You have to rap about these things. So if you look, that's when a lot of artists, not everybody, that's when a lot of artists started changing and they started doing more of the hardcore hip hop. And then that's really when the copycatting started. So then it's just kind of going on from there. I don't think a lot of artists are very original because everybody wants to be a dope dealer or a gangbanger. Everybody wants to be hard, but that's not everybody.
Tell me this, Davon. 88 all the way up to um, when Biggie released that album, 94, 95.
Yep.
Tell me the big records.
Ooh, oh my goodness. Okay. Well, you have, oh my God, where do you even begin? Okay, so if we're gonna start at 88, so then we're talking Public Enemy. Public Enemy came out, Takes the Nation's a Million to Hold Us Back. Personally, my pick, greatest album of all time. You have, if we're talking 88, you have Slick Rick. That was, I believe, his first album came out in 88. Um, we're talking Big Daddy Kane. I think Long Live the Kane. I think his first album came out in 88. You still had Rakim. Rakim, I think 88 might have been Follow the Leader. Those are classics right there, just in that era right there,
And
And then
if you had to summarize the energy, it was like a b-boy cool, no guns, fighting with hands, smoke
right,
smoke a little bit, chill, earn money. I'm not a
absolutely,
dope dealer. I'm just a
that's
cool
right.
cat from the hood.
The goal was to get a little money in your pocket, be able to get you some girls, maybe flash a little gold, go to a party, have fun, just hang out with the crew. There's always going to be that slightly criminal element there
Right.
because that's part of the neighborhoods that we come
Sure.
from,
Sure.
right? But that wasn't the main goal of that.
Right.
It was just really just to chill and have fun. So that really that defines that time, definitely. And then as you get into the 90s, that's when Tribe, that's when Tribe started blowing up. So especially that second album, the Low End Theory. Low End Theory was bananas, and then L came out. L had fallen off a little bit. Then he came back with Mama Said Not Too Loud. It was just so many flavors during that period.
I'm trying to make sure. I'm trying to see exactly with who you like. We're talking about Illmatic Nas.
Right. Yeah. Can't forget Illmatic. So Illmatic was 93, 94, somewhere around there. Definitely. Definitely. It's funny for me personally, when Illmatic came out, I wasn't here. I was in college. So I went to college in North Carolina.
Okay.
So I was, first of all, I was definitely exposed to a whole different type of hip hop, being down south. So when Nas first hit, I kind of wish I was here to experience it, because I heard people tell me stories about what it was like when Illmatic hit, but I never really experienced it because he got played in North Carolina, but he didn't get played like he got played up here. So my experience with that first Nas album was a little different, you know.
Car culture has changed a lot.
Yeah.
Like I remember like hearing joints in people's car. Like
Yes, sir. Absolutely. We used to listen. Absolutely. We used to listen on the radio. I remember like Stretch and Babito. You would stay up mad late to and just wait for them to break a song. Or you would listen to, you would get a mixtape. We're from the mixtape era. So Kid Capri, Ron G. A lot of times you would first hear a song on a mixtape, wouldn't even be on the radio. And, that's how somebody would have to play it for you. Like, yo, did you hear this song from so-and-so? I haven't heard that. Hold on, let me play it for you. I remember that. That was the way music is consumed now. I have this conversation with my daughter a lot, especially since she's an artist. The way music is consumed now is completely different and has totally changed from when we were coming up, and you hit on one of the ways. A lot of things we discovered word of mouth. Somebody had to tell us about it, or we were slaves to the radio, in the sense that that's really where we got most of our music from. But how we had to get put on, we generally heard it from someplace else, and then it would build from there.
Yeah, the mixtape had it before the radio for sure.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
you took credit. You gave yourself credit for having it before the radio. People say like, "Yo, you just heard that?" Like, man, I heard that 3 months ago.
Yeah,
You
right.
on that?
Right.
Like, come on, man. I was listening to that last summer. You just heard that.
Dude, exactly. And what's funny was I used to experience that when I went to college. So there would be songs when I would come back home that would be played on the radio. And then when I would go back to school, they would have no idea. So I'd have to tell them, because I remember like with the Wu-Tang Clan specifically, when Wu came out first, they were not down in North Carolina. So I was like, yo, I'm trying to tell y'all, these Wu-Tang Clan cats, these dudes are nice. And I remember certain songs I would hear, and then I would tell them about it. And then a couple of months later, it will pop on the radio. And I'm like, yo, that's the song. That's what I was telling y'all about. It's so funny to actually be able to experience that. It was crazy.
So I kind of feel like, if you ask me, so when I came to New York, in I have my dates down, 96.
Okay.
So,
Now, where'd you come from?
so I did 2 years in Florida, and
Okay.
before that I was in Jamaica.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right? So those 2 years when I was in Florida, like Trick Daddy was all over Florida.
Gotcha.
And at that point, like I saw Trick Daddy's face on the bus stop. It was like on the
Right.
like everywhere. Like in my mind, he wasn't a real rapper. He was just like some local nobody.
Gotcha.
Came
Gotcha.
to New York, Illmatic was everywhere.
Yeah.
Lauryn Hill, the Fugees,
Right.
they were
Right.
everywhere. So like if you ask me, when I was in Florida those 2 years, the artists that I thought the biggest were LL,
Okay. Gotcha.
Wu-Tang,
Yep.
and Biggie was on, but it wasn't like big yet.
Understood.
And in Florida, it wasn't big.
Right.
But when I came to New York, that's when like I understood P Diddy, Puffy, and
Right.
all of music was a lot more grittier.
Yes.
Um, the Wu Tang started doing their solo projects.
Yep.
This was '96.
Right.
Now, if you ask me, from '96 onward,
Yeah.
that's my golden era. If you ask
Got you.
me,
Okay. I
right?
got you.
If I had to put like Dr. Dre's first album, Snoop's first album are
Yeah.
timeless.
Classics, without a doubt.
So
Without a doubt.
they're part of that golden era. And if
Yes.
you asked me and you said, where does Illmatic fall? Illmatic is the pre-golden classics.
Okay.
When I listen to Reasonable Doubt and Illmatic,
Yeah.
it's too complex for me.
Okay.
And
Okay.
when I listen to Reasonable Doubt and I compare it to something like Watch the Throne, I
Okay.
hear a more engaged rap. Like the rap was too complex on Illmatic and Reasonable Doubt.
Okay.
Not too complex to play, but it doesn't have that playability to like want to just. And
I understand.
the other thing that I realize is that the era that you came into yourself with is going
Right.
to have an immense amount of value that regardless of what came before it, this
Right.
is you coming into yourself, and that
Yes.
music is always going to be your favorite, your
Oh,
go-to. So
without a doubt.
there's an automatic bias.
Agreed.
But I'm a
Agreed.
big fan of the hip hop genre, and I really try to categorize what I'm hearing. When you had
Hmm.
Black Power music being on the radio, like
Right.
I can't imagine like walking down the street with that kind of energy, and you see a black person versus a shoot 'em up Onyx. I don't know, kind of.
Right.
It's just shifting.
Oh, definitely. And it's fun. And one of the things I always like to say with a group like Public Enemy is Public Enemy was such a standalone group and they had such an impact that realistically, there hasn't been another group after them with the type of message they had and has been anywhere near as successful as they have been. So they kind of really just established that lane, and no one's really been able to fill it because like you said, the music and what gets promoted, because again, it's not that Public Enemy was the only one with that message. They certainly were not. But after a while, the radio, which during that era controlled music and controlled what people would hear, the radio just stopped playing that type of music. They decided they were going to play other types of music, so that really limited the ability or how successful groups were going to be. But that's why Public Enemy to me was so special, because they were successful. They were platinum selling artists with this positive message. And then slowly but surely, that message just kind of, I still say deliberately, just kind of went away from the radio. And they just kind of tried to, any artist who decided to go that route, I think the industry was just going to limit them because they just weren't going to back them like that.
I think the reality is the industry is going to back what sells.
Right.
So there's two parts to this, because I do kind of feel like there is a bias, but I do feel that the pop stuff sells more, right? A P. Diddy
Hmm.
remixed record is going to sell more than a Tribe Called Quest joint that wasn't, it. One has a pop main culture, mainstream feel. One is a
Right.
little more like it's a raw message that is good, but it's harder to get dancy on it.
Right. And I think you just hit on it. A lot of it is the dancing part of it is a huge part of the issue. Um, a lot of music, the really successful ones, You kind of have to be able, you kind of have to cross over, and you have to make it kind of universal. And what people really want to do, for the most part, is dance and have a good time. I always use an example of like the Black Eyed Peas. To me, as rappers, the Black Eyed Peas are horrible. I don't think they're very good. I don't think their raps are complex. I think a lot of their lyrics are simple. But the Black Eyed Peas have sold tons and tons of albums. You know why? Because the beats are good, they make catchy hooks, and people, regardless of color, can dance to it. So that's why they've sold as much as they have, you know. And I think that carries over to a lot of people. When you make the catchy dancer, because for me, I've learned a lot of times most people don't pay attention to the lyrics. They don't pay attention to what the rapper's saying. They know the beat and they know the hook, and that's it. The stuff that they say in between, most people don't even listen to, you know. So that's why some, like you said, how you thought like a Reasonable Doubt or Illmatic is complex. I think a lot of that turns a lot of people off because they just don't. They're just not listening, or they're just listening for the beat. Oh, this is pretty. This is a good beat. I can dance this. This is cool. Or I know this hook. I can sing this hook, but I don't really need to know the verse. I don't really need to know what's in between. You know. So I think that really plays a huge part of it, and that does limit some artists because they're just their style and their music is just not going to be. It's just not doesn't have mass appeal. That's what I'll say. It just doesn't have mass appeal.
Not many artists are able to fill up these verses the way Biggie did, the way Jay-Z did, and
Right.
keep your keep your attention. Um, and I think if you ask me, there was that 96 to maybe about 2002. That was like
Yeah.
P Diddy's era to kind of like,
Oh, absolutely.
and then coming out of that, that's when it went into like the South.
Yes, that's correct.
So
Yep.
from there right into the South, you had, New Orleans, Cash Money,
Yep.
Georgia, and Little John, and then from
Right.
there it went more into like a Ti South, Young Jeezy,
Mm-hmm.
and like,
Mm-hmm.
all of those years to me, I think it's like, you had the 13 colonies, which would have been 88
Mm-hmm.
up to when you said
Right.
around 2006.
Yeah.
Then you had the point when the Northeast started getting more poppy, and it allowed for the Southern guys to kind of latch onto that, and it's kind of been outwardly going ever since.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I agree with you on that. I think a lot of it is the the rest of the country was started to get more exposed, and they started to get more into hip hop, and they started to learn different ways to get their music out there and get it exposed. And living in New York, I always said, going to North Carolina, I learned something very valuable because living and growing up in New York, I assumed that most of the country lived like we do here in New York because I didn't know any better. I hadn't been anywhere.
Right.
So having my experiences going down south for college and interacting with different people from the south and different parts of the country, I started to really understand. And as I got older and I traveled more, started to understand that, here in the United States, the rest of the country outside of New York lives pretty similar. And how we live here in New York, we're kind of an aberration compared to the rest of the country, you know? So I think musically, once hip hop started to expand to a lot of the rest of the country, I think their sound was a lot more similar to each other than the sound coming from New York. New York rappers and New York music has a pretty specific sound and grit to it and a feel to it, which other parts don't have because they live differently. Their experience is different. So that's why I think a rapper from the South and why the other parts of the country started blowing up because there's a lot of similarities, and those similarities came out in the music, so they could relate and feel and vibe to a lot of that music. Whereas here in New York, we may listen or hear some of that stuff, and it's not connecting with us, but it connects to the rest of the country. So it got to a point where you didn't really need New York to be successful because the rest of the country was buying your music. you know? So I think that's kind of how New York kind of fell behind a little bit. We got a little static, and the rest of the country just was a lot more similar, and it led to the growth and the expansion of hip hop, and a lot more artists were able to be successful.
Well, local New York is still local New York. The thing is that there was a time when local New York was Hot 97.
Right.
And Hot 97 now, they're less of local New York and more of mainstream hip hop.
Right. And I think that's part of the reason why, because the game, the hip hop game has expanded, and it's not just defined by New York. For the longest time, New York was the one that was setting the trends and was setting the bar and established what's hip hop, what's not hip hop, what's cool and what's not cool. And as everybody else came in, they started to dilute some of that power that New York had. So like now, like you said, as a Hot 97, Power 105, they could play only New York hip hop if they want. They're probably not going to be very successful because the stuff that's really big and popular is mostly non-New York artists.
When you look at artists like Uzi Vert, Baby, Lil Baby, what's the vibe are you getting? What, like, how do you?
To be totally honest with you, I'm in old man vibe, so I don't really know much about these
When
young
you hear
rappers
it,
now.
when like, what do you
Right.
think when you're hearing this stuff?
Um, some of it is, I will say this. I think in hip hop in general, I think there is a lack of lyricism. So I think a lot of the stuff I hear is pretty simple and not complex and doesn't really make you think too much. I've always said, to me, if you're a rapper, when I listen to your music, I should feel like I can't do that. I can't make that song. I can't make those lyrics, because
Right,
that's what a rapper is. So if I'm listening to you and I'm like, yo, these are like seventh grade raps, I could have done that.
right.
I'm not impressed. And a lot of stuff I hear, a lot of these younger cats. And again, I don't listen anywhere as much as I used to. And I know there's plenty of young cats
Right.
out here who are talented. But the stuff I hear, a lot of times it turns me off because it doesn't catch my ear, because it just seems pretty simple. And a lot of them, the content is the same. So nobody's really catching my eye. I like a guy like J. Cole, because to me, J. Cole is different. I like even a guy like Kendrick. Kendrick is different. He's not right. There's some similarities and stuff they talk about, but everything is not the same. Everything is not just about, I was the drug dealer, or, I'm just banging all these women, and that's it. There's a space for that. And I'm not saying you can't rap about that. But again, hip hop to me is about telling a story. So what story are you telling, and how are you telling the story? That's what separates the Biggies and the Andre 3000s and the people who you like. That's what separates the really great ones from everybody else. Is the ability to tell your story. How do you express what it is you want to say? So if you're expressing yourself the same way on 10 songs on your album, I don't want to hear that, because that's not really creative. You're not doing anything different. You're just saying the same thing over and over, just to a different beat. To me, that's not an artist, you know. So that's what, for me, a lot of it's not catching my ear, so it turns me off a lot of the new stuff. But again, I'm old. I'm 48.
That's
You know,
okay. It's okay.
these youngsters aren't rapping to me.
There's so there's I think there's definitely something that should be addressed, right? And a part of it is, um, I think artists need to make better music, and I think
Agreed. Yes.
we need other stations. Like, we need a classic hip hop station. So
Right.
when a new artist makes classic sounding hip hop music, they will
Right.
go on that station.
Right.
If you only have Hot 97 and 105.1,
Right.
they're competing to play the same thing, which
Right.
half of the songs are also on the pop station,
Yep.
then it's really shrinking down the airtime possibility. So
Right.
between all the international stuff, the local stuff, the down south stuff, and you have to pack that all into Hot 97, it's
Right.
going to be impossible. One of the things that really impresses me is that artists that I love, who I still consider young, they don't rap anymore.
Right. Yeah.
I'm like, why are you not rapping anymore? Like, why did you stop making albums?
Right.
It's not that we stopped listening to them. I think they stopped being good.
I think that's part of it. You know, I think for a lot of for some rappers, they definitely lose a little bit of the edge when they become successful. So in losing that edge, their raps aren't the same, and they kind of lose what got people into them in the first place. With anything with longevity, you're going to change. Nobody's saying you have to stay exactly the same, because people are entitled to grow, and there's nothing wrong with that. But to me, and it goes back to the authenticity thing I kind of talk about, there's just supposed to be a certain edge to it. At least that's my image of hip hop. There's a certain edge to it, a certain honesty to it, a certain rawness to it. And when you're first trying to establish yourself, most artists have that. And then as they become successful and they get exposed to different things, they start to lose part of that hunger and that edge. And then they're not connecting with their fans because the fans pick up on that. They pick up on that they pick up on the change in the artist. And but I agree with you about older artists, because my thing is, look, in different genres, the older artists, they still perform. The Rolling Stones are like 200, but they still go out there and perform and rock out and sell out concerts all over the place. You know, I don't see why hip hop artists have to stop performing. It's one thing if they want to, but hip hop artists should be able to continue performing because they're all musicians, and most musicians don't stop creating or stop doing music. That's not what they do. They're musicians, so they should be able to keep going. Now, the venues may be smaller. That's okay. But if that's what you want to do, go. If you want to still perform, go out there and perform. They should be allowed to do that instead of people kind of looking down their nose like, oh my God, why is this guy still performing? Why are they still out there? Well, because they're doing what they love to do, you know?
Yeah, I would love to host, like people like the Locks, they're still young. Someone like the Locks, like
Absolutely.
I still want to hear, even if it's not a new album, like
Right.
the Locks don't even have 5 good albums. Like
Right.
as the
Right.
Locks, I would be like we didn't come in here to leave like this. If you ask me, I think they have two. I don't even think they have 3 albums. And as the Locks, I would say,
Right.
like, you know, as an artist, and again,
Yes.
this is I don't know them personally, and
Right.
I would
Right.
probably say something totally different if I knew them personally. But
Right.
someone like the Locks, I'm a bit disappointed. You know, P
Yeah.
Diddy jerked you in the beginning, then
Right.
Swiss Beats got you out of the deal. Now
Right.
I'm really excited. Like the Locks were gonna be free. I thought they would have made like 6 good albums,
Right.
and like the money is there, the beats are there.
Yeah.
The industry can't stop you from renting out a studio and putting out whatever you want. And
Right.
I still want to hear it. And there's plenty of people who do. And I
Sure.
can list so many artists who just like, I think obviously it got hard, but it's interesting to see how the music is. I wonder like why aren't you working? But
I got you.
my point
I,
is
yeah.
watching the evolution of the music, like some people can't sustain a tour. So I get that.
Right.
But
Right.
there's certain people who could, like
Sure.
T.I., or I could list someone like I know Little John's working, but
Right.
the music is kind of taking the people on a journey, right?
Right.
Like there was a
Right.
point when on a Saturday morning you had to turn on the radio. Like
Right.
you couldn't be black and not have a clue who's on the radio.
Right. Right.
And now I don't
Absolutely
feel
right.
that connection to the radio. Like R&B
Right.
has disappeared.
That's 100%. Absolutely.
Where did R&B go?
Right. Right. Exactly. You know, you look back, you want to talk about the golden age. Let me tell you something. 90s R&B was amazing. And you know it was amazing because all those songs are still timeless. When you throw them on now, they still people still react the same way. It was so good. There was so much talent. And then slowly but surely, it's kind of like hip hop took over, and all the R&B that would get played, or just the R&B only even stations, just kind of disappeared, and it just became hip hop. And it's like, well, what happened? What happened to the singers? Where did they go? You know?
I'm a little bit worried about stuff like that, but I'm also trying to put it all in perspective. So to shift the direction a little bit,
Yeah.
I'm concerned because if you ask me what's going on, if you look at the 60s, people were fighting to get into a better situation. And I
Right.
think, we definitely made a lot of progress. We got the laws on the books, we got the
Yep.
integration, you know, a lot of civil rights were gained. But I
Right.
think our fundamental position didn't rise.
Agreed.
And, with things like, the school to prison pipeline and the drug laws and the lack of jobs, like we kind of developed this permanent identity, and when things like the Shakari Richardson happens, I'm like, that looks really bad.
Hmm.
And conservatives like Candace Owens, she has a lot to say about um,
Yes,
some
she does.
artists like Cardi B and the stuff that gets put on the radio. Like,
Right.
when Jay-Z knows he's going to the Super Bowl, he'll change the song for the Super Bowl. Like, all right, this is
Right.
the Super Bowl. I'm not going to give them my everyday stuff. I'm going
Right.
to give them something more empowering that looks better for.
Right.
So I think someone like, when you call Cardi B, I know there was some controversy this year. When you call Cardi B, she has to do the opposite. All right, they're calling me, so I have to make it more raunchy, more on
Right.
the inappropriate side. And we have to be in a position where we have Cardi B doesn't have more say than what we do, right? Because when
Mhm.
when MTV can call Cardi and Cardi B is responding to MTV, then she has no accountability to Black America.
Right.
And she has to account to us first. Like, can I do this? Like,
Right.
we shouldn't be like, well, I'm worried about stuff like that. And even when Little Kim was doing it, so it's not something new, but
Right.
because you had R&B, it balanced it out.
Balance. Right. It's
Little
definitely
Kim
out of
did the
whack now.
balance.
Right.
So you still had conscious rappers and Little Kim. You still had
Right.
R&B and Little Kim. You still had
Right.
female rappers who were wholesome and Little Kim.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So now you don't get the album, you just get these one songs, and
Yes.
they go viral, and it's
Right.
inappropriate lyrics. Now white people are dancing to it. You know, drugs are legal. Like, things are like really, really crazy. And
Yeah.
the average person, they're gonna get swept through the cracks, and
Right.
it's all kind of normalized. And I would consider you and me more of the thinking, active, progressive Blacks who want to do our little bit, and we're trying to move forward. Also, you have to keep up with the times,
Right.
because if you don't
Absolutely.
keep up with the times, there's so many people who are in the community right now who are doing the good message with the good work.
Hmm.
And like I was saying, if you're a court officer, you have to record whatever it is you're doing. And it's
Right.
the same thing with those people who are doing the community work. they're not on Instagram, they're not on social media. So it's almost like it's not really happening.
Right.
That
Right.
pastor in Bed-Stuy, he's reaching 15, 20 people, but it's like it's not really happening because he doesn't have the Instagram live. And I think we need that. And I think if you ask me 40 years from now,
Hmm.
everything will be on Instagram live. So if you miss church today, you can go home and see it on Instagram live.
Right.
It's gonna
Right.
be like that. And it'll be the
Absolutely.
same for community meetings.
Yeah.
Everything is going to be online, and that way you'll have a better sense of what's happening. All of these
Right.
things are affecting us, and we see it, we're trying, but I think there really needs to be a bigger platform, a bigger reaching out to say, all right, you know, Pace Runs is doing this, we have to all get behind it. And
Right.
with things like that, it's selling out now and it's great, but I'm sure he would love to be 10 times as big.
Right.
So you need that community to rally around him, say, hey man, we see you doing, but we're telling you we're gonna buy the tickets 10 times as much. So let's,
Right.
you know, it's really to the point as times change, the progress it gets when the dollar loses value,
Hmm.
what is it called again? It depreciates.
Yeah.
So
Right.
the progress that we make as Black people, it begins
Yeah.
to depreciate in the modernization and the gentrification that's happening.
Hmm.
And we have to be able to keep up with it. Otherwise, you'll have the same progress, but you'll get lost in that shuffle. And
Yeah.
it's really a real thing.
You have to stay modern and you have to stay current. That's the only way you're going to be able to connect, especially with the younger generation. Because listen, the younger generation are the future. So you have to you in order to me, in order to understand them and in order to interact with them, you have to be aware of their experiences and what they're dealing with and what's going on currently. You don't always necessarily have to know everything, but you have to be involved, and there has to be some sort of connection. And their whole life, we have a whole generation coming up right now. They've never not had the internet, so they don't know anything other than being connected. That's what they do. That's why when you see these kids now, that's why they're on their phones all the time, because this is what they've come up with. And they live with social media. It's a huge part of their life. So I agree with you. I don't think you can be successful. I don't think you're really limited if you at least don't understand the platforms and how they work and have some kind of handle of it and involvement in it. Because this is the future. You know, one of my best friends, we laugh about it all the time. Is like, we say, remember when we were kids and we used to say, damn, I'd be at home and I have my computer and he'd have his computer and we'd be on the phone talking to each other and we'd be like, yo, wouldn't it be great if we could just play the same game at the same time with each other in our houses? It's like, yo, that would be amazing, you know? And that's what they've done now, you know? So this idea that we thought was just a crazy idea, the world has evolved and it's made it possible. And that's just kind of how, because things are always evolving. So you have to have a hand in the technology and the ways of the world and the younger generation, because that's going to give you a glimpse of the future. So I agree with you. You have to stay connected. You have to. And plus it widens what your exposure, and it gives you the opportunity to interact and see and get your message out to more people. Because again, if you're not on social media, like you said, how many people are you really impacting with your message? I'm not saying you can't impact people, but social media will definitely help you impact even more people, which for a lot of people, that's the goal, to try to impact as many people as you can.
The thing is, if you're doing something with a reach of 200 and you have a solid base, that 200 can give you all the traction you want. But I
Right.
think when you are recording it, and you're broadcasting it to a larger audience, I think it just resonates on another level, and it is the direction. So you want to build on it, because when the 200 dwindles, it kind of gives you a recyclable base to grow into.
Absolutely.
I've been thinking about this idea, and you can tell me what you think, right?
Okay.
We know that in the 14, 15, and 1600s, people from Africa was brought here,
Yeah.
right? And
Yep.
they were not just brought to the mainland America, they were
Right.
brought to Central America, South America, and the Caribbean. They
That's
also
correct.
spread to Europe and the whole globe, pretty much.
Yep.
I think over time, you get people who are African American, right?
Yep.
Their skin, let's say for argument's sake, is your color, right?
Yep. Yep.
They can grow up and they can have an experience, and they're clearly African American. They may have lived in the same street as you,
Hmm.
but somehow they grew up sheltered in a way, and they were told to stay away from certain things black,
Oh,
meaning,
absolutely.
you know, don't talk that way.
Right.
Don't watch this. Don't dress that way.
Right.
Stay away from those kinds of people.
Absolutely.
And I think there's a way where you can be of African descent and not wanting to be a part of certain parts of Black culture, certain things in Black culture.
Oh, of course.
For instance, things like the N word.
Right.
Certain people out there who are your age, my age, and younger, who stayed away from rap altogether because, oh, the N word. It's clearly, do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. I get you.
You
Yeah.
can be African American and not do these black things.
Right. Absolutely. I know what you mean. It's kind of like one of the things, because you just reminded me, like one of the things I taught my daughter, or one of the things I wanted to make sure she understood, and it goes into what you were saying, is about where where she grew up and the neighborhoods that she was exposed to. And I remember I would have these conversations with her mother, and I was like, listen, I'm a kid. I grew up in the projects of Brooklyn. That's where I'm from. I'm like, what you don't want to do with this child. Now, everybody wants their children to grow up in the best neighborhood possible. I understand that. And there's nothing wrong with that. To me, what you don't want to do is you don't want to demonize, or even, to me, shelter them from people who come from different types of neighborhoods, because that experience and that interacting with those people, if you never interact with somebody from a different environment, then how do you learn about those people? You learn by what you see on TV, what you read, what other people tell you, as opposed to the interactions with the tangible interaction with those people, you know? So it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, you want to try to protect your child and you want them to be safe, but you don't, to me, you don't want to tell them, okay, don't interact with those people, or people who come from that area. I don't want you around them. I don't want you talking to them. I don't want you dealing with them. I don't want you hanging out with them, you know? And I think that's where you talk about limiting yourself to parts of Black culture. A lot of times people will do that. It's like, don't hang out. These people from here, don't hang out with them. Hey, you're from New York. Why are you hanging out with all those people from the Caribbean? Don't hang out with those Caribbean people. You know how they are. Don't hang out with them. So I'm with you 200%. I think it's very important to not do that, because if you don't interact, I think it forces you to believe stuff from non-credible sources, which generally tends to be fabricated and lies, and prejudices you against those people from whatever that environment is you don't want them to be from.
Yeah. So right now, where do you see us going? Where should we be leaning into to get better? Like, what should African Americans be doing? Should we be, what do you see?
I think it's a good question. I think we definitely should start with, I think a start is growing and supporting and financially supporting our own businesses, our own communities, spending more of our money with us. And I think if we could start to do that and develop that and give ourselves financial power and a little bit more financial freedom, then we can start to make inroads into some of the bigger areas, some of the political areas, because without money or the power that money gives you, you're always going to be limited in what you can do here in the United States. Um, so I think that's really the start. I think we definitely have to believe and make sure people understand that the power of being involved in politics, and it's not useless, and things can change, because in order for things to change, you have to have a seat at the table. And I don't think you can start to change anything if you don't have a seat. And if you're not into politics, or if we don't have people in positions of power in politics, it's going to be it pretty much leaves you at the mercy of other people. Other people are making the decisions as to what's important, what's not important, where the money goes to. All that stuff is controlled. That's all politics. And you have to have people at the table to make those decisions. You know, we've been decrying, we've been talking about the police and how the police operate and defunding the police. Black people have been talking about the police for years. Okay. It's nothing new. We complain about it all the time, right? Now, how much has actually changed, right? How many times have we had a Black person in power and they've actually been able to change anything? Not very often, because generally it's not one person that's making the decision to change things. It's a bunch of people, you know? So you can go ahead and have a Black police chief, but if the rest of the power structure is white, if the people who are running the police unions are white, if the people who are voting on where the money goes are white, nothing's going to change, because you don't really have any power to try to change that. So, I think people need to understand that you have to be able to get yourself into those positions of power and be able to get more than one. You have to get a few of us, you have to get a number in those positions, and then you can go in and start to make change. And that's why I think part of the reason why so much hasn't changed is because we haven't gotten into those positions of power. Now, people are working against us. It's not just because Black people haven't done it because, they're just lazy or they don't want to. We've certainly tried, and society's working against us, you know, but we have to keep working at it and at least understand the value of being in these positions. And then once we start to get in those positions, then hopefully things will start to change from there.
I'm gonna challenge you with this.
Okay.
Now, if you look at the Indians,
Yeah.
right? The
Okay.
Indians from India.
Yep.
And if you look at the Asians, whether it's Japanese, Chinese, Korean, they're not fighting to get seats into the Senate and the House. That's not their focus. If you notice,
Okay.
right? Have you noticed this?
Okay. I can see where you're coming from. I can see that to some extent. Yes.
But so I'm challenging that because the Jews, they're not pumping their people into those positions. So I don't necessarily think we should focus on that. I think that can come, and that will be helpful. But I think what really needs to happen is we have to imitate those three groups and have a lot more unity.
Well, I think unity is a big piece. I definitely agree with you on that. I definitely agree with you
So
on
a
that.
part of the problem is you have South American Latinos who are different from Caribbean Latinos.
Right. That's correct.
And the South American is different from Mexican.
Right.
And they all speak Spanish, but if you came from Spain,
Right.
then you're in another group.
Right.
So there's too much intersectional divides. We really have to start lumping ourselves together, at least when it comes to financial and business things, and think that way. And we need to open ourselves up more and do things like the Indians are doing, and really think more critically about these things and stop asking and saying, in terms of protesting and those kinds of things, like we need to demand it from ourselves before we demand it from the government. And I
I
think,
hear,
I'm not saying don't do those things, but
yeah.
I think because we are so focused on the government needs to step it up and we need to get people into office, and we're not seeing the right in front of us.
I hear what you're saying, you know, but that definitely does need to happen. I do not disagree with you on that. I think the challenge with that, and I think why it's so difficult, that is a direct result of the European influence. And it's not as easy, it's difficult to get rid of that because that's deeply, deeply embedded in all of our cultures on this, particularly on this side of the world. If you're just going to talk the Americas, you're going to talk the Americas and you're going to talk the Caribbean, that European that European thought and separating us from each other, they've done a phenomenal job of that over the years. And you're right, it's a big reason why we haven't been able to unite. And it was hopefully at some point we'll start to power through that. We'll get past that. But it's been hundreds of years and it's definitely a challenge to get past it. I'm not justifying it and I'm not excusing it, but I know that influence is really really hard because you're right. To me, it's funny. If you ask me, I always say, listen, there's white people, and then there's everybody else. You know, because no matter what, no matter what quote unquote minority you are, you know, the majority looks at all of us as different. It doesn't really matter whether you're Asian or you're Indian or you're black or whatever, you're not European or you're not Caucasian. So we're automatically assumed and thought of as different. So to me, it's like we're all in the same boat. So we really should be fighting together because we're all fighting the same fight, you know. But unfortunately, that divide and conquer, they've divided us, and we don't look at each other that way. Much less, as you said, you get into even smaller when you break it down even less than that. Like you said, the the European Spaniards, they look down at the Central American Spaniards, who look down at the South American Spaniards, or the American blacks. They look down at the Caribbean blacks, and then everybody thinks they're different from the African blacks. It's like we're all so divided when in the end we're really all the same. There's really not that there really shouldn't be these differences, but they are. You know?
If you gave me the platform to be a Negro leader tomorrow, the
Yeah.
first thing I would say is, let's open up a bank
Hmm.
and shift all your savings around, shift your investments around into this kind of black pool. And I think deep down, there's a certain layer where black people have been conditioned to think, if I were to support something like that, as simple as that is today,
Yeah.
we would be ostracized and we would be facing, like, we need to assimilate into white institutions so
Right.
that we won't be seen as threatening. And I think that's the history lesson we've gotten from things like Tulsa and all the other massacres is if you guys
Yep.
start getting organized, we're not going
Right.
to look the other way like we do with the Indians, the Asians, or the Jews. We're going to
Right.
come after you guys. You guys are meant to be at the bottom.
Yeah. That's American history. So you're absolutely, I agree with you on that.
But I'm saying if you ask, I think deep down in our psyche,
Yeah.
there are plenty of people on good platforms who are saying things,
Yeah.
but even someone like the celebrity, he doesn't want to say, imagine if imagine if 10 big celebrities opened a bank. That's all you
Right.
need, 10 of them.
Right.
Like Beyonce and Jay-Z could open a bank by themselves.
Right.
Like, so you don't
Yeah.
need, I'm not talking about 4,000 people, but, and then have this bank be a real bank that's doing regular stuff, nothing crazy. Like,
Sure.
that would be, like, that's something that could happen tomorrow. And that
Right.
would change the way African Americans are viewed in this country. But again, I think if an artist were to get tied up with that, the media is going to jump on it. And
Of
what's the
course.
first thing they're going to say? Why do you need a black bank?
Right.
Why do you need a black?
Right. Of course. Of course. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Every celebrity, every really famous person, they have to make a decision. And it's kind of like the deal with fame. And the deal is if once you start to become really, really famous and really popular, they have to make a decision how black do they want to be? You know, am I going to be am I going to be Malcolm? Am I going to be Martin? Or am I just going to not say anything? You know, because that's part of the deal. Because historically, the more pro-black and the more you challenge and speak out on things, you're right. The mainstream society eventually will turn on you. Muhammad Ali is a great example. When he was younger, white folks hated Muhammad Ali. You know, especially Mister. I'm not going to serve in the Vietnam. As he said, the Viet Cong never did nothing to me. He's absolutely right. But then as he got older and that Parkinson's kicked in, and he lost the ability to speak out. All of a sudden, white people love Muhammad Ali. I'm like, you were the same ones that threw his ass in jail. Now, all of a sudden, you think he's great because he can't speak out. So it's like that's the same contract. And with America being America and money being so popular, money being the driving force, I think a lot of times you have you have people, they they try to do things without without trying not to be seen as militant or angry because it will affect their money. And guys like somebody like Malcolm X, I'm always amazed that I love listening to Malcolm X because just excuse my French for a minute, Alexi. To me, it's like Malcolm X. It's like he didn't give a fuck. Malcolm was so raw and so honest with what he said, but he was speaking a lot of truth, and it was hard truths. That's why so many black people love Malcolm X, is because he spoke the truth and he expressed how people felt. But the contrast to that, but then again, you saw the difference between the way he was received and the way Martin was received. Now, again, in the end, they turned on Martin too towards the end of his life when Martin started really focusing on economic power. Then they were like, oh, this, then so many white people went away from him, you know? But it's like, unfortunately, you have to make a choice. And a lot of people decide, and I'm not faulting them because I'm not the one losing money. So I'm not going to fault them for it. But it's like, unfortunately, you have to make a choice. It would be great if, like you said, if they all just said, okay, you know what? We're just all going in pro-black and they're just going to have to deal with it. That would be amazing. And I agree with you. I think a lot of good
could really come out of that. But I just don't think a lot of people faced with that choice, a lot of people don't make that choice. They try to straddle as much as they can, right or wrong. I think that's what a lot of people do.
What's scary for me is, I live in the suburbs of New Jersey, central New Jersey, Princeton.
Gotcha.
And I'm surrounded by people with PhDs, master's degrees in $800,000 homes, earning
Right.
100K or more.
Yep.
And they're very, very complacent, I would say.
Right.
They're well educated, they know the issues,
Yep.
but their hands are tied. I think once you start to show people the middle, like you're not like the people at the bottom and you're
Right.
halfway to the top, that just neutralizes so much of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. People get to a point where, they get leery of trying to shake things up, and in fear of losing what they have and maybe having to go back to being one of those other people or stuff. They're terrorized. They don't want to lose their spot or what they have. So then, yeah, they will just become neutral and not say or do anything to try to change it.
They'll
And
put the
then,
sign in the window.
exactly. Yes. Right.
The sign is now socially acceptable.
Right.
So you're like, all right, I'll put the sign. I do care. I'll watch the news story.
Right.
I'll give some dollars down at church.
Right.
But I'm worried that, the you and me, the educated people, the ones who are forward thinking, we're getting into that middle class where we have something to lose.
Right.
And the ones at the bottom with nothing to lose, they're just kind of in this stagnant bottom, hoping to get to where we are.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at this whole thing, and again, my fear is that we need something to attach ourselves to, but we're afraid of attaching ourselves to things because we've seen the last 60 years.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I agree with you. That's where the decision gets made when you have something to lose. Then you have to make a decision. What are you going to do at that point? What are you willing to risk? Because
I get the sense what you
there's a cost. There definitely is a cost to there's a cost to being super pro black. In the United States of America, there's a cost to that. So people have to decide, how much of that cost do they want to pay?
Yeah, I think most people are comfortable with trickling in, doing baby steps, small advances there, donating a little bit here, doing
Right.
smaller groups here, and hopefully it'll trickle into something in the future. I'm holding out hope. I continue to provide a platform, and I want to see more unity. That's my ultimate goal. And like you said, you're black focused, but everyone can be a part of that because we're all affected.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Taking it back, running is for everybody. And in the end, you know, I wouldn't want to limit ourselves as people by just saying, you know what, I only want to run with minorities. I only want to run with brown people, and I don't want to run with anybody else. That's really that would be, to me, that would be no different than the mentality if you just flipped it around on the other side. It's the same thing. You're just changing the color of the people. You know, you have to be willing to experience everyone, because again, that's how you understand. If you never interact with white people, how would you ever understand them or understand this other person, where this one person is coming from? Even if you just take one person, if I never take the time to talk to you or interact with you at all, how could I possibly understand where you're coming from, what you've been through, your mentality, you know. So you at least have to be open to the exchange, because whatever it is, whatever the field is, you should be open to people who don't look like you and their experiences also. It can't just be limited to your own, because if we just stick with minorities, then there's a whole part of the world and the world experience that we would not understand or be able to understand because we never interact with it. You know what I mean?
Davon, thank you so much for coming on today. I appreciated having you on. Leave us with a final thought, some positive words.
Haha, positive words. I'm definitely I definitely believe in positivity and staying positive, positive thoughts, positive vibes, positive feelings. I try to stick with that. So I always like to tell everybody, you know, we all have the ability to do some incredible things. We all go through tough times. We don't always believe in ourselves, but you just have to find something. You have to find one ray of light when things are the worst and you're doing really bad. Just find something to hold on to and something to pull you through. And whatever it is, whatever you find, you hold on to that and you believe in that, and it'll help pull you through. And then you'll be able, when you get to better times, you'll be able to look back, and then you'll be able to appreciate, like, wow, you know, that really saved me, or that really pulled me through, because we've all been there. So just find that positive light and hold on to that.
Any BRC events you want people to know about?
Uh, I don't think I think we don't have anything coming up recently. I know the two things that we'll have is, we'll definitely have at the race. We always like to call the race in Atlanta in October our homecoming. So if anybody out there is watching and they're going to the race in October in Atlanta, I'll be there. James will be there. BRC will be there. So many of our members will be there. That'll be a great time to link up and see and meet. That'll be a great meet and greet time to be able to see a lot of people. And then
Tell them how they could get their shirt, get their gear.
absolutely. So definitely join us on Facebook. The group on Facebook is Black Runners Connection. So just send us an invite to join and we'll let you in. Runners. That is our Instagram for Black Runners Connection, BLK Runners. Okay. So whether it's Facebook or the Instagram, you can follow, or Instagram, you can follow us from there. And then you can get in contact with us from there.
All right, man. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming on today. And I look forward to partnering with you and doing some more things in the future.
All right. Thanks again, for having me, Alexi. I appreciate you, bro.
All right, man. Have a good day.
All righty.